All right, what's up guys? Derek here, aka Mr. Enchanted. Now it's been a while since I've last made a video, but I recently played in my first store set champs and I was lucky enough to win. So I won the Playmat and the Hiro Hamada Enchanted card. And I wanted to make a video and talk about the deck that I ran and my reasoning behind choosing it. And so let's quickly get into the video and dodge the whole intro stuff. So this is the deck list. We played green steel. I called it Cacao Bend, as you'll soonly see, and it was a 60 card deck that ran 17 uninkables. So let's quickly go through the deck, and I want to give my thoughts and reasoning for why I decided to play this for my store set champs, and also update you guys with what I've basically been doing. So first, no brainer, we got the 1 cost Diablo. We got 4 copies there. We have 4 of the Morph, 4 Ursula, and then 2 copies of Doc. So this was our 1 to 2 drop package. Normally in the past when I play green steel, I have been a huge advocate for Cursed Merfolk. It is one of my favorite cards in all of Lorcana. I just think it's absolutely busted when it works. Not only is it questing for 2, it also is a target for your opponent's removal. And if they happen to challenge it, you get a free sudden chill, for example. So I have been a huge Cursed Merfolk lover since I discovered the card. And so this list is a little different for me as I kind of step back from the whole Cursed Merfolk line and try to explore something further. Now, of course, we have 4 copies of the Big Bird, and then this is where things get a little spicy. We got 3 copies of the Emerald Hey Hey. This is the ramping card where if your opponent has more ink than you, then you can take the top card of your deck and put it into your Inkwell Exerted. So this is essentially a great card to ramp when you are on the draw, or even if when you're on the play and you're playing against a Sapphire deck that plays maybe Tipo or Sail, and then a Halfaro go and they get ahead of you in ink, you can play the Hey Hey to match them and sort of catch up. Next, we have 4 copies of Ursula Deceiver of All, 4 copies of Pete, 3 copies of the Muses, and 4 copies of Sad Beast. Now, nothing too different here, but other than that, we got 3 Pete's, the Space Pirate, and we had 2 Tinkerbells. So we were running a pretty robust shift morph package. We had 4 Beast, 3 Space Pete, 2 Big Tinks, and also 4 Diablos that can shift on morph as well. So a lot of shift targets for morph. Now, the main reason for Pete Space Pirate, anyone knows when this card ever hits the board and it exerts, it is such a pain to deal with. And it is an amazing card against Steel Song. Now, the one caveat here is that Steel Song has been running World's Greatest Criminal Minds for Maui Shark, but also that card completely destroys Space Pete, so you have to be very aware of that. But however, I figured that Space Pete is such a huge card in the overall strategy of this deck that I had to at least play 2 to 3 copies of it. And then the Tinkerbell, this was mainly a last minute addition. This was sort of the card I wanted to have insurance for if there's any, let's say, more aggro or hyper aggro type matchups, say Churna Dogs, for example. Against that deck, you know, they like to go wide and then just quest you out of the building. And so in those situations, I would try to develop the morph and then shift Tink on 4, hit everything for 1, and then obviously challenge in and just blow up their whole board. So Tinkerbell was sort of like an insurance policy for me against the more aggressive decks, because we were running very light on the 1 and 2 drops. We only had 4 Diablos on 1, 4 Morphs, and 4 Ursulas on 2. And Morph and Ursula, these aren't even cards that you can contest the board with early. You know, we don't have any Smees, we don't have any Captain Hooks, we don't have anything like that to contest the early game. And so this deck is inherently weak against things like Churna Dogs and, you know, those hyper aggro type strategies. And so the Big Tank was a little bit of an insurance policy against that. Now, getting into the star of the deck, oh my goodness, we have Bend to My Will. Not 1 copy, not 2, but 3 copies of Bend to My Will. Now, what's funny was that at the store set champs, a lot of people were giving me shit for playing this card. They thought I was trolling. They thought I was a little bit crazy, but trust me, there's a reason for why there's so many copies of this card. And so the thought process that I had leading up to store set champs, or rather after the Hiram ban, was what can we do to green steel that is a little unorthodox? Now, the pervasive thought that was spreading all throughout the Lorcana community was that, okay, Hiram's gone, Diablo is going to reign king. And you saw this emergence of the green-purple Diablo discard deck, since it had 8 1-drop Diablos that you can shift on. There's all these people running Peter Pan's Shadow Finder and Yagos and Genies and Elsa. There's even the Pegasus, that red Pegasus and the red-purple deck. Like, everyone was out to get Diablo. And so I wanted to find a way to build a deck that kind of shifted away from that. Now, in the past with Green Steel, we would mulligan aggressively for our Diablo shift line. We want to get the Diablo on 1, we want to shift it on 2, play Storm, play Strength, etc. And that's not really viable anymore, as there are so many decks that ran Diablo hate. So I wanted to get away from that. And then also I wanted to figure out, is there an archetype for Green Steel discard that didn't have to run the traditional discard package? And so if you remove the normal discard package, that means Sudden Chill, Hypnotize, Bruno, and Prince John. Now, depending on how many copies of those aforementioned cards you ran in your list, you're saving anywhere from, let's say, 12 to 16 cards from your deck list. So now you have tons of room to be flexible, to be creative, and build something brand new. And that's what I did. And I started with this card. And I thought, okay, what if instead of trying to discard our opponent early on with developing a Prince John and emptying their hand and drawing a bunch of cards, what if we kind of just waited and just play the waiting game? Because there are so many of these Amethyst decks that were so focused on killing Diablos and outvaluing them and bringing rabbits back, and there was Genies, and there was Library, and there was all this card draw, and Steel Song was going crazy again, that what if we just took a step back, waited, created a patient strategy around Bend to My Will, let them do all their bouncing and drawing and gaining all this value, and then just blow up their hand. And so that was a concept I came up with this deck. Now, in order to do that, you have to be able to win or survive the tempo game in the early to mid game. And so what I did was I combined this Bend to My Will super brick with another super brick, Mother Knows Best. Now, at first, this card seems pretty bad, as it is uninkable. And again, it's another super brick that you have in your deck. Now, as you can see in my list, we got 3 Bends, we got 4 Mother Knows Best, and we have 2 Docks. So that's 9 bricks that you can have in like your opening hand. That's awful. However, the good thing about running the Diablo line is that when you shift your Diablo, you can discard the Bend to My Will if you get it early on. And that's okay because you still have 2 other copies in the deck. And the other thing that's very interesting is that Diablo can also sing Mother Knows Best, and this can help you win the tempo war early on. Now, of course, there's a specific reason for why all the songs that I chose were 3 costs, as Ursula Deceiver of All can double sing all of them. And Ursula Deceiver of All double singing Mother Knows Best is insane. I can't recall how many times, but playing Ursula Deceiver of All on 3, playing the Muses on 4, and then using Ursula to double sing Mother Knows Best, and you can bounce 2 cards and then bounce 2 other low cost cards, for example. You can bounce 4 cards in one turn, which is insane, right? And so that was a huge part of my strategy for winning the tempo wars in the mid game, was adding the Mother Knows Best to my arsenal, along with the Let the Storm Rage On and Strength of a Raging Fire. And then the Mother Knows Best, it has this like interesting synergy with Bend to My Will, because it allows you to survive, to get to the late game, but then also when you play Mother Knows Best, it's more cards you can discard from their hand. And so that was the main idea. And the other card also that I wanted to include was I'm Still Here. I removed the Cove. Now, the reason why I removed the Hidden Cove was in the past, we would try to play Diablo on 1, shift Diablo on 2, and then move Diablo into the Cove. This is one of the most powerful and broken openers in all of Green Steel. However, there wasn't too many people running brawls anymore, as I saw all these red-blue lists that were playing like the DKP, Shark, Lore, Pirate's Life build, and I saw so many red-blue players just cutting brawl. And so I was like, okay, maybe I don't really need Hidden Cove that much anymore. So I went from my normal 2 to 3 copies down to 2, down to 1, and then I just cut it all together and just to see if I would miss it. And I didn't really miss it, because the main strategy with this deck is you're sort of trying to stall out the early to mid game and just survive. And by doing that, by placing out a Cove, your opponent can just easily kill it. So I didn't really see the value in playing the Cove anymore, and so I just cut it altogether. But what I did want to keep is the I'm Still Here. Because there's times where you can say you shift your Diablo, now you can sing I'm Still Here on yourself, or you can sing I'm Still Here with Diablo on Diablo, so he gets resist +2, and Diablo can survive, let's say, a Cindy using Storm, or a Cindy using Strength or something. So that's the reason for that. And also Ursula Deceiver of All can double sing I'm Still Here. And so the main idea, or the main strategy that I had with this deck was, because of the potential catastrophe of bricking with this list, I had to get away from the aggressive mulligan strategy. So no longer were the days of just keeping a bird and throwing away the rest. That was out the window. Now I tried to mulligan more towards curve and also more towards the morph beast line. Now, if I got the Diablo line, then sure, I'd keep it, but I really wanted to make sure I got a 2-drop. Like, I really need to get that morph or that Ursula 2. And that's what I was sort of mulliganing for. And also, there's times where you just kind of got to keep your inkable cards in your opening hand. Not only because you'll need them to ink, but I found that if you mulligan too aggressively, like say you send away 5 or 6, there's a certain percentage of time where you're going to get a bunch of opening hands with Doc or Bend to My Will or Mother Knows Best, and it's going to be just crippling for you. So you have to take a more conservative approach to the mulligan and just be okay with not having to shift Diablo. Now, the times where we were able to shift Beast was absolutely incredible, because Beast was perfect for this deck, because the value you gain from Beast is you just have it sit there and it just draws cards for you, which is great. And that was the whole idea, is I would try to get the Beast online, get my draw engines going, and then get a Muses out or an Ursula Deceiver of All, and just try to blow up or bounce my opponent's board to try to get to the late game in order to play Hey Hey on 5, so I could ramp from 5 to 6, ink the next turn, and play Bend to My Will. And then also you can use the Muses to facilitate the bouncing mechanic and bounce as much stuff to your opponent's hand as you can before playing Bend. And I thought that this was a good strategy for the current meta, because I saw this emergence of so many purple decks around me. There was Blurples going crazy, red purple was coming back, and I was still seeing green purple as well. So you had the Genie, you had Elsa, and Genie and Elsa are 2 cards that share 2 strength, which is prime targets for the Muses. And so those decks also had no way of stopping Bend to My Will, because they weren't running Steel, so they didn't have Pete. They weren't running Amber, so they didn't have Bare Necessities. And so what are they going to do? They can't stop the Bend to My Will. So what I would do is I would just develop the Beast, develop the Muses, kind of just sit back, let them, get them, they want to get to 10 lore, go ahead, be my guest. And then a lot of the times my opponents were confused. They're like, why aren't you doing anything? You're not exerting anything. You're not challenging. You're not questing. You're just putting a Beast, putting a Muses, playing an Ursula, just sitting there, just doing nothing. Even when there was prime opportunities where I could quest, maybe get to sneak in a lore or 2, I just thought it's just not worth it. There could be a surprise Fox that comes out of nowhere, or whatever, some Peter Pan Shadow Finder, or there's so many cards now with Rush that I just didn't bother. And I would just take it super, super slow in the early to mid game and just kind of survive. And then my opponents saw that as opportunity to get their draw engines going. You know, they started getting the rabbit bounce going. They started moving things into the library and all that type of stuff. And that was fine by me. And then eventually I just get the Muses out, bounce everything, play Bend, and they're cooked. Now, the other good thing about this deck that I was also using to target was Steel Song. And I'm not sure how everyone's local meta is evolving, but for me, I saw a lot of Steel Song just increase in popularity, because with the red-blue deck being suppressed, that was one of Steel Song's, biggest predators, was red-blue. Was the red-blue with the Sisu's and not Ice Block, what's the coil? Sapphire Coil or whatever like that, and the big Sisu, it would just destroy Amber Steel. And so I figured a lot of people would be playing Amber Steel. And this is where this deck is great against that, because not only do you have Pete and Space Pete, but you can use Mother Knows Best to essentially repeat over and over and over. And the way you do this is by just playing your Pete, and you can use Pete to play Mother Knows Best to bounce that Pete, and you can just replay it again. Or what was even crazier, I'd play Pete, and then I double sing Mother Knows Best with my Ursula Deceiver of All, bounce both of those Petes, and you have 2 more Petes to play back to back. And that is what I did in my final game in order to win the mat, was just using Mother Knows Best to bounce Pete multiple times so that my red-purple player couldn't play his Be Prepared. And so that was the general strategy that I was using, or those were the decks that I was kind of targeting. Now, of course, this deck isn't good against everything. When you play the Mirror, the more traditional green steel discard deck that has the Prince Johns and the Sudden Chills and all that stuff, it can get a little dicey because they can discard you early on. But this is where I had the inclusion of Doc. Now, having 2 copies of Doc is huge because not only can you play Doc to give you that little extra gas, but there's sometimes you can just play Doc and leave him on the board, and you can bounce him with the Muses later. And you can also bounce Doc with Mother Knows Best. And again, refuel, regas. And so this was the sort of strategy that I had in place for the 3 type of decks that I was targeting. So first was the Amethyst deck, the Amethyst decks. Second was Steel Song. And then third was the discard decks. And it worked really well. I must have the Melee link here somewhere. Let me just... Okay, here. So this was the store set champs I played. We had 29 players, and I finished 6-1-1. So we had 5 rounds of Swiss. Where was I? I went 3-1-1. So I think I played 4 different Steel Songs on the day, and just the whole interaction of Pete and Mother Knows Best and Space Pete carried me through all of that. Now, unfortunately, I didn't face any Blurple decks. That was one of the decks that I was really targeting, but I was able to play against Red Purple. And again, against Red Purple, they were generally playing Peter Pan Shadowfinders. They were playing Genies, for example. And again, just being patient, bouncing everything, and using Bend to My Will just completely annihilated that whole value from their deck. Let me go back to the deck list. And so yeah, so that was pretty much the deck I ran. This was the list that I came up with. Now, it took me a long time to actually come up with this deck, and this is sort of the reason why I haven't been posting since the newest set came out, is that early on I was doing a lot of testing and I was just getting wrecked. Now, this is one thing about TCGs and Lorcana, is that if you are someone who likes to be a deck builder, who likes to create decks, you are going to take a lot of L's. Now, I'm not someone who just races to, I don't know, ink decks and copies the latest meta deck. I don't find any enjoyment in that. One of my favorite things when it comes to Lorcana is building my own decks, discovering new ideas. Just, that's what's fun for me. And as a deck builder, you have to know that it's going to come with a lot of losses, a lot of frustration, and you're going to struggle. And so in the beginning of this set, I didn't really feel confident in sharing any deck lists because everything that I was playing and building sucked, if I'm being honest. I was just losing a lot. Even like at locals, I was testing a whole bunch of yellow-green variants. I was playing Chernadogs a lot. I was playing the old school lemon-lime discard. I was playing some green-purple. I was even playing... I was playing Diggy Hole, like a Diggy Hole variant, and I was just testing with all these different decks because I was so excited that the Hiro ban just opened things up. There's so many different combinations and permutations and just ways to like be creative and make these different spicy decks that I had a lot of fun with it. And so I kind of strayed away from Green Steel because Green Steel is my main deck. It's my main color. It's the deck that I've had the most success with. It's the deck that I have the most practice with. But I just really took this set to just take a step back and have a lot of fun. So I had a lot of fun, took a lot of L's, learned a lot, and then I eventually sort of came back to the whole Green Steel archetype, and I was trying to figure out, okay, well, you know, what can Green Steel evolve into? And I was playing a more pirate-heavy version, and I found that that deck was way too, like, 50-50-ish, you know. It wasn't really beating or dominating anything, really. It was just kind of so-so, and in other matchups, it was just dead in the water. I was playing that green Daisy Duck that when you have a pirate at a location, you quest, you draw a card, and it was just very underwhelming, if I'm being honest. And so it took me a while to get to this list, but I was happy that it performed relatively well. Now, there are some drawbacks with playing a deck like this as well, is that you will lose to yourself at times, because no matter how safely or conservatively you mulligan, there's going to be hands very similar to Steel Song where you have 3 whole new worlds. In this case, you might have 3 Bend to My Wills, or 3 Mother Knows Best, or you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of potential for bricking, and you have to be okay with that. And I'm sure most Steel Song players know this. You kind of just ride the wave, right? There's going to be games where you draw those 4 whole new worlds or whatever it is, and those Zeus, and you lose, and the deck loses to itself, and there's nothing you can do. And that is what this deck is prone to as well. But I think it has enough tools in it to sort of survive that early to mid game where you can get into the late game and really utilize the Bend to My Will. And again, one of my most favorite interactions on the whole day was setting up this Ursula Deceiver of All, double singing Mother Knows Best, double bouncing with the muses, and then just playing a Bend to My Will, which is just so crazy, and is so like deflating for your opponent when you play something like that. And what's also great about playing a deck like this is that the surprise factor. No one sees this coming. And to be honest, there were times where I would ink hey early on, and then a few of my opponents would like give me this weird look, or they'd laugh at me, or they kind of think I'm a noob. They're like, oh man, this guy plays Emerald hey, he must be a noob. Well, this would be so easy. And you know, that's a great advantage to have, especially when it comes to TCGs, is having that surprise factor, or having your opponents underestimate you. And then all of a sudden you bounce their whole board, bend their hand, right? And it's, it actually feels kind of dirty, but it is a lot of fun. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think I talked about every card in this deck. The Tank was for the anti-aggro, Pete, Steel Song, Beast, Draw Engine, Doc, Draw Engine, hey for the ramp, and all our songs double singable by Ursula Deceiver of All. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So we were lucky enough to again win a Store Set Champs mat. Now I am selling it. I'm posting it up on eBay this Thursday. I kind of don't really care too much for the mat, so I'm just going to sell it and hopefully use that money to fuel more Lorcana endeavors, or maybe use that money to pay for the next case. And I'm sure I'll get a case and we can rip it on stream, and I'll stream that on the channel. So I think that's it. Other than that, for those who managed to watch this video and still subscribe to this channel, you know, thank you. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be doing moving forward. I definitely want to make more videos talking more about strategy and deck building, or maybe I will just make some videos with my subpar decks that don't do well. Maybe there's some value there in sharing some of my thoughts and ideas, and also some of my failures, right? Because in Lorcana, there's lots of failures. There's lots of struggles. You take a lot of L's. Things don't always work out for you, right? It's not a game where skill completely dominates. You know, there's luck, there's variance, there's so many different factors that goes into TCGs. And so you just have to be okay with that moving forward. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Subscribe if you haven't. If you enjoy this type of video, please let me know in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.